Welcome to the Great Basin Fire Potential Briefing for Tuesday, July 11th. This is Gina McGuire. Over the next couple of days, we will continue to see wetter thunderstorms across much of the southern half of Utah into southern Nevada. However, again, these thunderstorms will be producing mostly wetting rains with higher humidity. However, by Thursday, we'll likely see a return of thunderstorms further north into northeast Nevada, far northwest Utah, and potentially southwest Idaho, and these thunderstorms will be on the drier side and will likely increase fire potential. Also this weekend, we'll see a return of thunderstorms further north and west as we get some remnant moisture from Hurricane Eugene in the eastern Pacific. Again, we'll likely see increases to fire potential again over the northern half of Nevada into parts of northwest Utah and southwest Idaho as we move through this week and this weekend. Over the last 24 hours, we generally saw lightning activity over the southern half of the Great Basin, and these thunderstorms did produce wetting rains in parts of the Book Cliffs, the Uintas, and also southwest Utah into southern Nevada, where many areas saw above a half-inch of rainfall in some of these heavier storms. Great Basin fire activity was generally low to moderate yesterday. We did see a new large fire over western Nevada and still numerous large fires ongoing over much of the northern half of Nevada into southwest Idaho and northern Utah. Over the last 7 days, precipitation has been generally spotty, and the heavier precipitation confined to thunderstorms into the higher terrain of Utah. However, over the last 14 days, any precipitation we've seen has largely been far below normal across all areas. Our ERCs, in response to these very dry conditions, are still critical over much of Utah into eastern and southern Nevada, but have been on the decline with continued thunderstorms over the last several days. Many areas that were above the 97th percentile have now dropped to below the 90th percentile. However, still are critical in these areas, and it will take several more days of moisture before these ERCs really start to drop below critical levels in some areas. However, ERCs continue to be on the rise over western and northern areas that remain on the drier side of this moisture. Our 10-hour fuel moisture again is more representative of our current fire risk in our low elevation grasses, and you can see fuel moisture is still very low over all of Nevada into western Utah and southwest Idaho. Therefore, even in areas where ERCs are a little bit lower, these dry grasses with the heavy grass load is what's driving our fire activity. As a reminder, we have a Fuels and Fire Behavior Advisory in effect for the Great Basin, and this map shows where our concerns lie. In western and northern Nevada into northwest Utah, it's mainly the significant grass crop that we see that is driving the fires and the Fuel and Fire Behavior Advisory. Further east across the eastern half of Utah, it's the record ERCs. However, these are on their downward trend, but will still remain critical for the next several days. In between, we have a mixture of very high ERCs near record setting and also a good grass crop. Live fuel moistures have continued to decline over parts of western and northern areas of the Great Basin and have since dropped below normal over far western Nevada and near record lows over southwest and western Utah. The satellite loop from this morning shows plenty of cloud cover across parts of Nevada and Utah further south, associated with moisture that continues to remain over the area. This morning we've had some isolated showers and thunderstorms over southern Nevada into southwest and central Utah. However, relative humidity is elevated in these areas above 50%, and some of these showers are likely producing light amounts of precipitation. However, today we'll see thunderstorms redevelop in some of the same areas we saw yesterday over the southern half of Nevada into Utah. Also on the satellite loop, you can see Hurricane Eugene off the Baja coast. This will continue moving northwestward, and much of the deep moisture will remain out of the Great Basin. However, likely some mid to upper level remnant moisture will swing around this ridge of high pressure into parts of western and northern areas of the Great Basin by this weekend, bringing enough moisture to fuel additional thunderstorms. Now looking at the weather pattern for later today, again still moisture is in place over the southern half of the Great Basin for continued thunderstorms. Much of these thunderstorms across Utah will likely be on the wetter side with a mix of wet and dry storms further west. Therefore, we have no high risk across the area today, again with those fuels continuing to moistening up for a couple of days over mainly Utah. Looking at the relative humidity and weather for today, again, elevated relative humidity where we are expecting those storms across Utah, where RH will likely remain above 20%, and generally be between 15 and 20% over southern Nevada. And you can see on the image on the right where we are expecting those thunderstorms, mainly scattered or numerous thunderstorms over the southern half of Nevada into southern and the eastern half of Utah. As we go into Wednesday, this moisture starts to push a little bit further east, however still remains in place over the southern half of the Great Basin. Storms may not be quite as wet on Wednesday as on Tuesday, but still relative humidity will remain elevated in the south. Therefore, again, no high risk is issued. However, you can see the continued dry air in place over Idaho and western and northern Nevada, where we continue to have moderate risk of large fire or growth on existing fires, despite any triggers. On Wednesday, relative humidity will still remain quite low in the single digits over the western half of the Great Basin, but still somewhat elevated over the higher terrain of Utah. And the image on the right shows again those areas of showers and thunderstorms still in some of the same places we saw yesterday and will see again today. As we move into Thursday, some moisture starts to move its way up north into northeast Nevada and southwest Idaho. Therefore, thunderstorm coverage will likely start spreading a little bit further north, and we have put some high risks for lightning over northeast Nevada, where fuels are still very critical and we continue to see problems with fires. Therefore, any new ignitions will be possible on Thursday. This also might stretch into parts of southwest Idaho. On Thursday, relative humidity still remains low in the west and a little bit higher in the higher terrain of Utah, but again, not as high as we will see the next couple of days, as lightning coverage will be decreasing across Utah on Thursday, but will likely be increasing over northeast Nevada. We could even see a few cells pop up along the Sierra front. However, right now coverage looks fairly isolated, but we will continue to monitor this as fuels are very critical and we do have large fires ongoing in the area. The overall forecast amount of precip for the next 3 days is generally focused across Utah, with some wetting rains, a little bit more sparse across southern Nevada as we go through the next few days. As we go into the extended period, Friday through the weekend, mainly dry air is in place across Idaho, but you can see now the remnants of Hurricane Eugene off the west coast, which is continuing to track northwestward away from the area. However, some remnant moisture in the mid and upper levels may start swinging around this area of high pressure up into northern California and Oregon on Friday. Right now, much of the moisture looks to remain outside of Nevada, so we do not have any high risks for lightning, but we will continue to monitor this, especially on the far western side of the Great Basin, as there is a high risk in southeast Oregon for this lightning, again with the moisture coming from Hurricane Eugene. Further south, we will generally see isolated to widely scattered thunderstorms, mainly across Utah into southern Nevada. However, coverage will likely remain decreased from what we'll see over the next couple of days. As we move into Saturday, we see moisture now start to push north from the southwest monsoon, so we will see thunderstorm coverage increasing over the eastern half of the Great Basin. And then around this periphery of the area of high pressure is where we will likely see more on the way of drier storms than wetter. So we have high risk much of north central and northeast Nevada up into southwest Idaho, again for the return of a little bit higher coverage of lightning as we go into the weekend. We will continue to see storms across Utah, but again, these will be on the wetter side as fuel moistures continue to increase. On Sunday, a little bit more moisture works its way north and west, so we have increased the threat of drier lightning over much of the northern half of Nevada into the Sierra front and also continuing over southwest Idaho. It's uncertain right now how much of the deeper moisture will make it further west, so we will be watching these areas as we move through the weekend. Further east, any thunderstorms will likely be more on the wetter side over the eastern half of the Great Basin. On Monday, moisture remains in place for thunderstorms, especially across Idaho, the eastern half of Nevada, and further east. Again, wetter storms in Utah and drier storms on the periphery. We have not high-risked anything for Monday, but we will continue to monitor this, especially over parts of northern Nevada up into Idaho. The overall forecast amount of precipitation for the next week shows again most of the wetting rains associated with these thunderstorms will be across Utah, with again some areas over southern Nevada seeing some moisture as well. The rest of the Great Basin, any precipitation we see will be associated with thunderstorm activity and be relatively spotty. Over the next 8 to 14 days, this takes us into the third week in July. Still warm temperatures continue out west, however that above normal chances of precipitation now spreads across the Great Basin and potentially even over western areas, depending on how much tropical moisture we have moving northward towards the third week in July. That concludes our briefing for today. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Thank you for listening.